This week, we interview Gururaj Pandurangi, founder and CEO at Cloudneeti, to discuss continuous cloud assurance. In the second segment, John and I, then Paul and I, recap RSA Conference 2019. And this week, our third segment airs recorded interviews with Venafi, XM Cyber, and Onapsis from RSA Conference. So stay tuned for all of that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Is your company moving applications into public cloud? Well, now you have problems, as your on-premises security products don't work for public cloud, traditional security assessments don't give you the real picture, and the biggest security threat is now misconfiguration of your cloud workloads. Cloudneeti offers you a cloud-native approach to manage security, data privacy, and compliance. With Cloudneeti, you gain instant visibility into your security posture and the ability to continuously monitor and remediate any deviations. Take a free test drive of Cloudneeti's continuous cloud assurance platform by visiting cloudneeti.com/Security Weekly. That's cloud, N-E-E-T-I. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live.
Welcome to episode number 129 of Enterprise Security Weekly for March 13th, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, in the middle of a blizzard in Colorado, joined by my co-host today, John Strand. Hey, John.
I'm still hearing the kicking beats of the music. Oh, there we go. Hey, Matt.
Hey, John. Well, you're not home, so you're not going to get the storm that I'm in the middle of, but I think your wife is, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, she's getting buried in snow, and I'm in Tahoe, which has already been buried in snow. So it seems like it's just very much a winter edition of Enterprise Security Weekly this week.
Yeah, definitely. Join us April 1st to 3rd at Disney's Contemporary Resort for InfoSec World 2019. Where you can connect and network with like-minded individuals in search of actionable information. Visit infosecworld.misty.com / it's missing. Haha, I can't remember what it was. InfoSec World, I think. And use the registration code OS19-SecWeek for 15% off the main conference or World Pass. If you are interested in booking an interview or briefing with Security Weekly, please go to securityweekly.com / conference request to submit your request. Also, John Strand will be teaching active defense and cyber deception at Black Hat 2019. Please register at www.blackhat.com /US-19 /training /schedule. And then you got to search for a guide to active defense, cyber deception, and hacking back, because the URL to read on the air is way too long. Or go to the wiki and just click the link, because I embedded it in the wiki for this week.
Let's go with that, because our wiki is awesome.
Oh my gosh. But the URL was so long, John. I'm like, how am I going to get people to the registration page?
No. And it's even hard. If you do a Google search for Black Hat cyber deception class, it wants to take you to like 2017, 2018, 2016. So, and it's all a mess. But we will be back at Black Hat. Do you know if you and Paul are going to be making it out there this year?
Of course. We'll be at Black Hat and DEF CON again.
Awesome. Very cool, because we'll be there as well. We got a booth and everything. We're like totes legit.
Nice. Yeah, we're working on some options for DEF CON. We're trying to see if we can do some recording in one of the villages, but we'll also definitely be at Black Hat as well.
I will be, I'm pretty sure, I don't know yet, we're still working on it, but it sounds to me like we're going to have a good presence in the IoT village. We just worked with the IoT village people. We brought in a bunch of SDR stuff. for RSA. So we're probably going to be in that village. So we'll have a Security Weekly presence in multiple places at Black Hat for everybody. So it should be a good time.
Yeah, it always is. Vegas in August, what can be better?
You got to go mountain biking with me, man. I always take people up to Blue Diamond. We go mountain biking in 115-degree heat. It's a good time.
Oh yeah, I bet. Better bring lots of water. All right, let's get to our guest interview. So Gururaj Pandurangi is the founder and CEO of Cloudneeti. Guru has 20 years of professional experience, a good portion of which is an early adopter of cloud technologies and building global scale cloud products like Windows Live, Bing, consumer identity, and federations. He is passionate about helping businesses accelerate their cloud adoption by proactively managing security and compliance posture in their public cloud infrastructure. Guru, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly.
Hey, Matt. Nice meeting you here. And John, a pleasure to meet you here as well. I'm happy to be here.
Guru, for people who don't know, Cloudneeti is a sponsor on Enterprise Security Weekly. You just saw their ad run right before this. And I've been working, Guru, with you for, it's probably been a little over a year now. Before I joined Security Weekly, I was helping you with some early strategies on your solution, which is part of the reason why you're a sponsor now. But we also really want to dig into kind of what is it that Cloudneeti does, because I think your approach to cloud security and compliance has been a little different than others in the industry. You actually started with Microsoft Azure, where everybody else went after AWS. So let's start with the problem statement. Kind of, what was the problem you saw in the early days that evolved into where Cloudneeti is today?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, thank you, Matt. In the last year or so, you've been a great mentor to me and my team. And I think over time, as our relationship has progressed, we've learned quite a bit from the industry, from you, from your colleagues, and in general from the industry experts that Security Weekly is now bringing to the fore as well. So it's amazing to be associated with that space. A little about Cloudneeti. So as you rightly mentioned, we are into continuous assurance for security, compliance, and privacy for public cloud workloads. The origins of Cloudneeti began almost in about 2016, 2017, when we were working with various enterprise customers, about 4 in particular. And some of them were on to, we are helping them migrate onto AWS, some of them into AWS and Azure. And there's one particular enterprise customer that started asking us, hey, all of this is fine, but my CISO is extremely worried on how do I look at a single dashboard view across multiple cloud providers. And at that time, they had the opportunity to work with some of the third-party vendors on AWS. So they asked us and tasked me and my team to go figure out what can we do to go get metrics and information on various workloads on Azure. So they were big consumers of Azure and O365. So that's where that's where our journey began, to kind of service these 1 or 2 customers and then go from there. But as we eventually started maturing, we started understanding that this is not a problem with 1 or 2 enterprises themselves. We started seeing that these problems are kind of actually transcend the entire industry, be it enterprises, be it MSPs, be it ISVs, and so on and so forth. And over a period of time, it was also a pleasurable experience with Microsoft inviting us to build various blueprints, and they started referring as the Azure Blueprints. We pioneered the conversation, we architected, and we built all of these architecture templates, self-service deployable templates. We open sourced them. We built the PCI-DSS blueprint. We co-authored and worked with various industry experts as well as compliance companies, be it Coalfi or Ernst & Young, and so on and so forth. So we learned quite a bit of things around both security, privacy, and compliance. We were ordained to bring in a FedRAMP related compliance automation. We're looking at HIPAA and high trust. I think our journey began in about 2017 or maybe even early 2018 timeframe, when we were building and helping these enterprises. As we as we started maturing into that space, we realized that it is not just that we can bring in Azure. We had to also bring in O365. We also had to bring in AWS, and very recently, many customers have been demanding to get GCP as well. So we truly started becoming a multi-cloud continuous assurance a product company, if you will. That's our kind of origins, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this work started more on the consulting side. You were advising customers on how to move into Azure, look at the configuration security, and then Cloudneeti really kind of came out of that services work. And we've seen this in other places. I mean, John, we've got a great example with active countermeasures, right? You do a lot of work as a consultant, you realize that, wait, I can productize some of this and get it to scale. Cloudneeti went through that same evolution really on the Azure side initially.
That's right. In fact, to tell you the truth, we never even thought that we should productize it. But as we started building this, we built a virtual machine-based, an IaaS-based infrastructure for just one of the enterprise, and we thought that should be good enough. So once we realized that maybe this has some value, we tried to kind of put that as a proof of concept onto Azure Marketplace, and we started getting almost 10 to 15 requests per month. And we were like, wow, we can't scale to something like this. We really need to build a SaaS solution because we can't manage updates. Azure Marketplace solutions are solutions where you can deploy to the customer Azure subscription. Same is the case with AWS, if you will. But then, it was a painful effort for us to go and build newer features into the product and apply to various customer subscriptions. So we decided to take a step back and build a SaaS service, which is multi-tenant, which works across the space for Azure, AWS, and O365. But you're right. We started as consulting. We started with one or two customers. Then we started productizing.
Yeah, fantastic.
So let's talk about the solution for a second, right? I think people will be familiar with this maybe from an AWS perspective a little bit, just because we've seen solutions in the space. But when we think about this is validating the configuration of your AWS account, pulling security data from your workloads in that account and some of the configuration data. Walk me through some of the different things that you're doing across not only Azure, right, but also the other cloud platforms.
Yeah. So maybe taking a step back, the reason that products like Cloudneeti even exist in the marketplace is because of trying to solve one single problem. And the biggest problem with cloud adoption, of course, is security and compliance risk associated to it. But that emanates from misconfigurations. And I think kind of a little primer around it, we have seen that customers adopting IaaS, PaaS services, serverless services, containers, data analytics, and you name it, right? Most of these workloads are configurations driven. You can either build an ARM template or a JSON templates or CloudFormation templates. Again, these are configuration driven. Some might even call it as policy driven or code driven, right? Depends on how they will actually deploy it. But workloads are configuration driven. We have also seen that the workload protection platforms could be antivirus installations, firewalls, threat management. They are also getting natively configuration driven on Azure and AWS. So in a sense, configurations really form the bedrock of your provisioning of your cloud apps, if you will. And then you take the next layer on who really is applying these configurations. And we've seen from our own experience, it's not the SecOps team. As traditionally what was being touted in about 2015, 2016 timeframe, that InfoSec or the SecOps team should really own the configuration. Actually, that's not what happens in the industry, right? So it's the DevOps teams who's peddling all these configurations. They've been asked by their business teams to be extremely agile. So they have these bi-weekly or every fortnightly releases. And because they are in control of the configurations, in fact, they are the one who are adding additional risk because they are pushing out, their apps misconfigured most of the times. So configuration becomes the biggest risk. And we started our journey to start looking at the baseline configurations, trying to really automate the best practices around various cloud providers. Initially, we started off with Azure, then we added O365 security and compliance configuration, be it SharePoint, be it Skype or OneDrive, Exchange Online, and very recently we started adding AWS configurations, be it EC2 instances, serverless, and so on and so forth. So configurations was a prime space that we wanted to solve.
And I wanted to jump in right there, and I think that that's a really important point whenever you're talking about Azure, is I think some people would argue that Microsoft offers a lot of different security things, whether it's Office 365 or it's doing cloud security with Azure. The problem that I see with Azure, and this isn't just an Azure problem, but you see this in AWS and Google, is the ability to try to tie together the compliance, the alerting, the monitoring all together into one place. Microsoft may have a lot of pieces, but they're currently spread all over the place, and you have to pay for each of them separate. And that is a huge concern for a number of our customers, because as you add more of that complexity in multiple places to try to hook into, it actually creates blind spots that you generally miss in a lot of attacks.
No, it does. And I think, John, you have a point around how customers look at it. But I think the problem actually goes in multitude, especially for MSPs. Right? We have seen that MSPs are controlling or actually managing various customer workloads to the scale of about hundreds of customers. And every customer might have a combination of Azure subscriptions, O365 subscriptions, AWS accounts. So then you add the problem that you have with one or two of the cloud accounts, and you multiply that by thousands. And we've seen that aggregating security alerts, aggregating all these threat protection details, aggregating all the configuration or the misconfigurations. Most of the times, they're also looking at aggregating compliance regimes. Could be, they want to go PCI DSS compliance across all of their cloud accounts. Or even, some customers are just looking at CIS compliance for virtual machines or the public cloud, like CIS for Azure, CIS for AWS, and CIS for. So combine all of these and multiply that by the number of cloud accounts that they might have. The problem is massive. Enterprises might have about 100, 150 odd cloud accounts, but in general, we've also seen that MSPs are going much more broader. So they have hundreds and thousands of cloud accounts. So yeah, it's a massive problem, and that visibility and then the close feedback loop is much needed, but that doesn't exist as a core, as a core industry proposition at this moment.
Now, do you believe that most companies understand the complexity that they're getting into, especially whenever it comes to compliance? Just talk about the compliance side of the table.
Yeah.
Do you think that they understand the complexity of trying to implement enterprise level compliance in the cloud before they move into it? Or do you think that a lot of them get into a cloud implementation, then try to back it into a compliance solution and realize that it's an incredibly complex issue in and of itself?
Yeah, so let me peel maybe a couple of layers from your question. So I think your question is, do they understand how to achieve compliance or manage compliance? The answer is they used to, right? In the on-prem world, they used to bring in external auditors. They would bring in one or two time point assessments, if you will. And most of the external auditors would understand either a workflow-based compliance, or they might have some kind of a scanning tool to do network-based assessment or virtual machine-based assessment. In the cloud world, it's now very, very different, right? These workloads, are first of all very, very diverse. It's not only network and virtual machine-based. It's also serverless, PaaS, right? You can't deploy agents on top of it. So there is a problem around auditors or external auditors even understanding how to even assess this. Add that to the fact that even enterprises, in general, the customers, they themselves don't understand what are their responsibilities versus what are the cloud providers' responsibilities. Many times they assume that just because Azure or AWS is compliant for PCI DSS, it becomes implicit that their workloads are also compliant in general. So it takes time for them to educate them that, hey, that's not the case. Azure and AWS will only, look at their data centers, their hosting platforms, if you will, and that's about it. Any workloads that customers bring on top of Azure or AWS platforms, right? It's customers' responsibility. And then they start asking questions around, well, how do I manage my customer's responsibility? How do I even validated. And that's where that's where Microsoft brought us in for the Azure Blueprints conversation, where we built open sourced tool sets and architecture frameworks, one-click deploy, and which are by default secure and by default compliant to specific industry standards. But again, then you start adding, okay, what happens when customers change these configurations? We've seen that there are 2 or 3 trends that are happening in this space. The first trend is PCI DSS compliance frameworks, NIST, and HIPAA. They're all going to the continuous compliance mode, right? Which means that it is no longer important for you to do a point-in-time assessment by a third-party auditor, but you need to provide proof around continuous compliance. Especially for NIST and PCI are actually pushing that out with the PCI DSS 3.2 version 1. You're seeing that they have made those changes. They have proposed that to the industry that, hey, for all the card holder or payment companies, continuous compliance is mandatory. NIST is also going through the same process. So that makes this industry problem around achieving compliance and managing compliance much more arcane.
When John was asking about how to bring all the different pieces, wasn't that what Azure Security Center was supposed to do? Wasn't that supposed to be the place that all got integrated? So how does Cloudneeti either work with or augment Security Center? Because I thought that was supposed to be Microsoft's platform for trying to bring all this data together.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are partners to the Azure security team, both the engineering team as well as partners, with co-selling Azure Security Center and Cloudneeti. In general, we don't compete with Azure Security Center. We actually build upon, or rather extend, Azure Security Center. The core premise of Azure Security Center, or even for that matter, the newly announced AWS Security Hub that Reignite last year, is around bringing together or aggregating per account, per cloud account, details around security alerts, aspects around configurations in general, and a little bit of compliance portfolios. Most of them will either support CIS compliance and even kind of tiptoeing into PCI DSS and ISO compliance. But it's mostly very, very early stages, if you will, and no doubt they will invest quite a bit to increase the portfolio around it. But we've seen that that's not really sufficient for neither the MSPs nor the enterprises nor the ISVs. So they look upon, well, I have my workload, which is extreme, which is at multiple Azure accounts or AWS accounts. Bring me an aggregated view around it. Help me understand how to position various policy exceptions. So they might have an aspect around, I understand that this is an exception at this moment. Let me put in a workflow around, I don't want to manage this particular policy for the next 1 or 2 months. We'll come back to it once we have the DevOps team, go figure out how to solve this particular problem, right? So all of these, take the aspects of around governance and policy exceptions that Azure Security Center does not, right? It just does a quick scan, and only about maybe in case of Cloudneeti, we have aggregated all or most of the Azure Security Center recommendations, tasks, and all of these APIs into our portfolio, which only forms about 20 to 25% of the total coverage that Cloudneeti provides. So Cloudneeti adds another 70-75% of various policies and various compliance regimes, which includes regional regimes. We recently been asked to add the Australia Privacy Policy Act, as well as the Australia Cybersecurity, or ASD8. We've been working with the India regions around the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India cybersecurity guidelines, right? As well as some of the German data sovereignty, aspects we built in GDPR, as part of the quick assessment or an active validation for Azure, AWS, and O365. So Cloudneeti is becoming more and more richer in terms of how they can govern their security posture, how they can reduce risk, by looking at any of the frameworks of their choice. Could be NIST, could be PCI, could be specific to any industry. we offer about 13 plus benchmark standards and laws, as part of default package that we sell to our customers. So yes, we build upon and extend Azure Security Center, and we are taking the same approach to build upon and extend AWS Security Hub.
Got it. So if I can summarize, I think if you're a single cloud account with some basic CIS benchmark requirements, Azure Security Center is probably enough. But as soon as I go to multi-accounts, multi-cloud providers, multiple regulatory requirements, that's where something like Cloudneeti that can aggregate across that, provide additional depth into other regulatory requirements, that's the differentiation over what AWS Security Hub or an Azure Security Center is really going to provide to a base customer.
That's correct. And to kind of add a little more color to it, we worked with Gartner to understand, and Gartner advises on both the GTM aspects as well as where should we stand from a strategy standpoint. But it's very, very clear that the positioning of Cloudneeti is in what's been referred as CSPM, or Cloud Security Posture Management. Last year, Gartner had a different definition. They called it as CISPA, Cloud Infrastructure Security Posture Assessment. This year they call it a CSPM. Who knows? Next year they might call it and add compliance and privacy to it. But the positioning is very, very clear. If you have one or two accounts, cloud accounts, Azure Security Center and AWS Security Hub might be good enough, for you. But if you go into the factor of multiple cloud accounts, or even diverse workloads, or multi-cloud, posture management, be it the Azure ecosystem, the Microsoft ecosystem combined with AWS, with GCP, that gets very, very complex, for customers to manage. And on top of it, having a single pane of glass view across multiple regimes, is where the combination of that is what Cloudneeti offers.
Yeah, makes complete sense. You talked a little bit about DevOps driving the configuration. So who uses Cloudneeti? Is the DevOps team using it? Is it the SecOps team using it? Is that combination? I mean, where do those lines get drawn in the way the solution is used? Because if DevOps is doing the configuration, are they doing a set of checks and validations as part of their deployments, and then SecOps is using it from a roll-up reporting kind of posture? Is that how that's working?
Actually, we've seen it, I think more or less yes, but we've seen that the customer's journey is into maybe, three different parts. The first part of the journey is where they are still trying to, get their workloads onto a cloud provider, maybe one or two cloud providers. That's the time when either migration companies or enterprises or ISVs would use Cloudneeti mostly from a best practices engine. So it takes time for them to understand what are really the security best practices. They use our product as a kind of a tooling, as a reference guide, if you will, as they are building and pushing to their public cloud. So we have APIs exposed. So every time they do a deployment, they can quickly call our API and find out whether that posture is good enough for them to proceed ahead with the deployment or roll back. So we have DevOps teams use us for best practices analyzer, if you will, as well as being able to understand whether they should proceed further in deployment or not. We've seen beyond that, once they start getting comfortable around it, we've seen the SecOps team as well as even the GRC team use our product to kind of do a quick, a quick assessment around the readiness of either be a security benchmark that they are trying to implement across their organization, or could be even a compliance framework that they want to get, let's say, PCI compliant in the next 6 months or so. So they will take snapshot of posture analysis using our product for their specific set of cloud accounts, if you will, be it Azure O365 and AWS combined. And then they take after they take a baseline assessment, they will open up conversations with their internal auditors, with their SecOps team to see whether this makes sense. What are the exceptions that they should go with? Are these policies really too rigid? Many times, as a CSPM vendor, we would say that, hey, this is exposed to the internet. right? And the risk is, we kind of determine that there is a risk associated to it. But ultimately, it's the customers who's responsible whether to make sense of it. Should they close the ports? Should they allow the ports and have really a definition around, hey, this is needed because this is really exposed to the internet for this particular purpose. So we add, some data classification around it to say whether, hey, this is the kind of sensitivity based on tags, based on very recently announced Azure data classification or information protection. So we kind of color our security posture based on even that as well. So we'll really see that the SecOps team and the GRC team start getting involved. And as the apps start getting into production, they will configure maybe ticketing integration. So Cloudneeti offers one-click ticketing around if there is a deviation from from their assigned baseline, if you will. We open tickets for all of these violated policies, all the violated resources, and assign them to appropriate individuals. So the SecOps team will really start using it, and internally they will manage those incidents, work with the DevOps team or work with SecOps team to classify that as low priority or high priority and work through that. And the last stage is where auditors come into play. Most times, the internal SecOps team or even the internal auditing team, especially at the enterprises, they will take a snapshot and usually take the evidence and even give it to the auditors. Many of the auditors, the top 10 or 15 auditing companies, be it some of the big fives, they actually use our products as well. So they know and understand how the data is being collected, and they're able to reference that with their auditing tool sets, if you will. So the evidence can be mapped directly into their tool sets. We provide the PDF reports as well as even raw data that they can plug in as evidence. Of course, we do only the information security or the technology-based assessment. Everything else around people, training, processes, etc., are really managed by auditors. So we kind of provide the evidence as well. So it's kind of three stages: DevOps, SecOps, and GRC, if you will. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think of it as kind of a collaboration platform that
it is,
the different users can all leverage that data to do different aspects of what they need to do from a configuration, security, compliance, even audit perspective, and giving a central place for all that data to be. So I think of it more as kind of this collaboration platform of where all this cloud security and configuration data lives.
Yeah, it is. And I think, Matt, you're right. So there's a new segment that's upcoming in the industry called as integrated risk management. And especially cloud really enables that. Before cloud happened, integrated risk management was primarily interview-based and was not really ordained to get data, data and have data-based decision making. I think with cloud and with the APIs coming into play, this data is really readily available, right? Data around compliance, data around security is readily available. In fact, Cloudneeti offers this data, instantly, right? So, you deploy something within a couple of minutes, you have the security posture, you have the compliance posture. So you really can drive various data-based decisions around risk posture, into the real kind of integrated risk management. So you're absolutely right. So this data is extremely meaningful to them.
Yeah, having built a couple GRC, built one and worked at another one, self-assessment, it's great for augmenting kind of management and operational controls, but technical controls have always been the hard part in keeping up to date with all the control changes at the technical component, right? So if I can automate those components, augment that with questionnaires, now I do get a broader understanding of kind of that holistic risk picture that questionnaires could never do at the technical control side.
You're right, and I think the advantages that we have seen over a product like like Cloudneeti against an interview-based one is we actually shrink down the time it takes to perform evidence collection, either internally, internal audit teams or even the external teams, to the scale of, like, for example, about a month or so back, there was an auditor who worked with us as well as a customer. Customer actually gave the evidence to them. Auditor has provided a 3-week window to gather evidence. Customer was able to gather and get the evidence within a day, and they had to shrink auditing budget, because that the evidence was already there. So what will an auditor do to go collect and spend that 3 weeks time? So we've seen that the value to the customer is actually immense. So they are now able to shrink down the time it takes to perform an audit. They can do multiple assessments instead of doing one assessment over a period of 1 month or 2 months or so. They can do multiple assessment over the year, and with the same amount of money, if you will, right? Because now evidence is so readily available that why would you spend hundreds and thousands of dollars to do, let's say, a PCI DSS audit across multiple cloud accounts? So the value is very, very realized very fast.
Yeah. Sorry, John, I've been monopolizing the conversation. Any questions for Guru?
No, I think he's hit all the questions I was going to ask before I asked them, which is a good sign.
That's great. Guru, thank you for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly. If anyone wants to learn more about Cloudneeti, please visit securityweekly.com/Cloudneeti. That's Cloud NEETI. We'll take a short break. Then John and I will do a quick RSA recap before we air our pre-recorded RSA conference recap and RSA conference interviews.